Navigating the Grain Market, a man's professional journey and leadership in Texas and agriculture. Next on World Changers. Welcome to World Changers, the podcast where we dive deep into the stories of those who are making a difference one step at a time. From entrepreneurs to activists, scientists to spiritual leaders, we explore the journeys of individuals who are shaping our world for the better. Join us as we uncover the inspiration, challenges, and triumphs behind their remarkable contributions. Get ready to be inspired, motivated, and empowered to change the world. This is World Changers. Today on World Changers, I have Robert Braden with us. Robert Braden is the CEO of Texas Grain and Feed Association. Robert is a graduate of Texas Tech University and has spent the last 25 years working professionally as a Texas Grain and Feed merchandiser and business manager. His professional work experience includes managing a cross-country merchandising company located outside of San Angelo for the first 12 years of his career before he transitioned to the role of Senior Texas Merchandising Manager of Schooler in their Kansas City office for nearly 10 years. Robert returned to Texas with his wife, Emily, in 2020 to manage a farmers cooperative in South Texas prior to accepting his current position with Texas Grain and Feed Association. He brings a wealth of experience and knowledge in the grain and feed trading and leadership to the association. So welcome, Robert. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Arinn. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Fantastic. So
what do you want to talk about today?
I think to start, a lot of people have no idea what a grain merchandiser is and what the importance of that is in the ag field or even in Texas as a whole. So let's kind of start. I would love to start with like your background, what got you into agriculture, got you into grain, and then we'll get into Texas Grain and Feed and what that association is about.
What got me in it? I was born in it. My family, my father's side I would have been an 8th generation farmer in West Texas.
Okay.
And so that was always my grandpa's joke or sentiment was the last country that our family belonged to was Texas before we were United States citizens, which I always thought was pretty cool. But
where in West Texas?
South of Midland in a little town called Midkiff.
Okay.
In the Rankin area is where my grandparents are from. They're farmers down there. Now, my dad married my mother at Texas Tech, and her dad was a grain merchandiser in Cape Parish, ran a grain merchandising business out of Lubbock, Texas. It was funny because in this position now, I found an old directory from the early 60s and found one of my grandfather's tab ads. And it was comical to me because it was like, what do we trade? And on his page, it was, we trade everything in agriculture. So I thought that was cool that it covered all the bases and with everything.
Yeah.
When I graduated college, I had a different career goal in mind. I grew up in agriculture. I'd seen the farming side of it. I'd seen the grain merchandising side of it. I started routing trucks, hauling grain in Texas when I was probably 13 or 14 years old, to different locations, get them to go where they're supposed to be going, talking freight rates, regurgitating what I was taught from my father. But again, it's agriculture. So I experienced all the cyclical nature of that beast. There were times where we were buying boats and campers and times were good. And, you'd fast forward 1 year and you're having trouble making a rent payment.
Yep.
So that was a very cyclical lifestyle. I didn't want that for myself. So when I went to Texas Tech, I was eager to find a career, stable career and something, anything but that. And, as it were, I fell back into it. My dad had just started a new business and needed some help. So I returned home, started that, worked for him side by side. Again, we've been working with him for several years, routing trucks and doing the things, but I started doing some merchandising, spent about 3 or 4 years under him when he passed away suddenly. The director, it was a subsidiary a business at the time, and the board of directors made me managing partner. And I'm so thankful for that opportunity. I don't know where I'd ended up without that. So I ran that business for another probably 8 or 9 years successfully, very successfully, to the point where a Kansas City or an Omaha-based grain company found me. I was doing some business with them. They had some projects in Texas that they wanted to grow, and somehow they got the idea that I knew something about trucking and merchandising. So they hired me, moved me to Kansas City, to Overland Park, Kansas, and it was a great transition. I left Texas thinking I was the smartest merchandiser in the world, and it took me about an hour to figure out there were a whole lot smarter people than me at that time, with the group I was surrounded with in Overland Park, which is great. The sentiment of you don't want to be the smartest man in the room, surround yourself.
Never. Yeah.
Was never truer than my time at Schooler. So learned a lot, sharpened my skills, my leadership skills, and built a great business there. We partnered with a lot of country elevators, cooperatives across the state, made a lot of lifetime relationships and friends. That was one of the mantras that I coined while I was at Schooler. The current CEO, Paul Mace, actually gave me credit for the vision at one time was to create those relationships that we maintain through our career, and the business will take care of itself at the end of the day. And so that's what I've done, and that's it's gone really well. So I had the opportunity to retire from my post at Schooler, return back to Texas to get closer to family and our relationships. Of course, I was trading the Texas marketplace the whole time. Took a co-op position. I managed a small cooperative in South Texas. That was great. You're getting on the ground floor. Being in the business for 20 years, I had never seen corn harvest.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have that in West Texas. It was a milo and a wheat situation. So it was nice to be down there on the ground floor. It's amazing what happens at that step of the supply chain. I mean, from a day-to-day listening, I was in a coffee shop every day with the same 9 farmers. And you get to hear everything under the sun, and you really get a look into agriculture and how it comes to be. But the importance of merchandising is a lot of times, it's not as transparent as you would think. And these crops and this production has to make its way to the market,
Mm-hmm.
to the best market, most efficiently. And those dollars all roll down to the farmer. So if there's a lack of it, it's less for your farming base and less for agriculture. And
Mm-hmm.
to be sustainable, you've had to mind your P's and Q's and really research your areas to know what you're doing. So that's what I did, and it's been a great time. I've learned a lot of things. I've met a lot of people, and I think I've helped a lot of people over the years better themselves. That was always my mantra. I'm
Yep.
going to do what's good for us.
Exactly.
When we make agreements, I want to be able to sign both sides of the agreement. We're going to help each other. Your business will grow and my business will
Mm-hmm.
grow, and we're going to get through this together. I've coined that in my position now with Texas Grain and Feed. We're in this together, and we all really are. It's you don't realize how fragile the supply chain is. It doesn't take much to upset the flow, and immediately see repercussions rippling through not just the marketplace, but your own home, your own kitchen table. Right now, just yesterday, we have a Canadian rail strike that went into place. So now all Canadian rail movements from the United States or to Canada and back and forth are at a standstill, which is a huge issue. So we're going to have to deal with, and we dealt with this a couple times on the southern border with different things. So the things we address, especially in my new appointment this January with Texas Grain and Feed, it's nice to be on the working side of this to try to solve these problems for our members and spearhead some of this. But some of these things are bigger than just what we can do on the ground floor, like this Canadian rail strike. We're working with National Grain and Feed. We're calling on Justin Trudeau to and their legislators to get things moving again, because it is hugely impactful. I mean, Canada is where a majority of or a big partner in our ethanol production.
Which is great, and we'll touch base on that here in a second. I want to back up just a second for some of our viewers, just to get an understanding of on the farmers. So I'm 6th generation farmer rancher, Eastern New Mexico, West Texas. And so you mentioned corn harvest, you've never seen it. So whereas I came in and that's what we did. So explain and tell me if I'm wrong with this, just to kind of get a brief explanation in our minds. The farmer can harvest the grain or the corn or the peanuts or whatever crop they're doing, and then to get it traded or sold as a whole, instead of just like a farmer's market on the side of the road, it would then go into the hands of
Someone, right? Yeah,
which would then the merchandiser would take over of trading it out.
could be. So
Because I remember when I went and visited your office at Schooler, it was like Wall Street of agriculture.
it really
TVs
was.
everywhere, and everyone's walking around on the phones, and it
Yeah,
was a really neat experience.
there's different aspects of it. Yeah, I mean, so working on the ground level, at the cooperative level, or the grain private grain elevator level,
Mhm.
you're on the ground in the dust and the mice, um, with the growers coming in every day. At Schooler, you're up at a 8th floor um, sky building with 175 of your closest friends in cubicles.
Mhm.
But yeah, at the end of the day, if you're a grower, you're growing your corn, your wheat, your milo. Um, when you have the opportunity to market that as it's harvested or prior, I mean, how that works. But your choices are local grain markets, where
Mhm.
your local co-op elevators. Through the years and through the natural progression of this business, farmers have gotten bigger and grown with the industry.
Mhm.
So way back when, a grower has a bobtail truck that he can go 5 miles in with a 20,000 pound load. He's stymied. He's got to go to the local elevator, the closest person. Through the years, as drought and trucking, that farmer acquires bigger trucks, better equipment. He can travel further, so it opens up more of that supply chain to him. He builds more storage where he can
Mhm.
store it on the farm, and his marketing opportunities aren't just the local co-op or the local grain elevator. You've got the bigger markets, the resellers that are often those high rises that handle a lot more grain, take bigger positions, and they'll send trucks to the field. They'll accommodate those logistics for these growers. But yeah, ultimately it boils down to the farmer's decision on who he qualifies as a counterpart, and that's hugely important. I
Mhm.
always made sure to impress upon my customers on the farming side was, I at the end of the day, and I'd have them call and apologize for going with the next option because he paid him a little bit more,
Mhm.
and we always had really strong relationships. So these people would call me apologetic as you can be, and I'd explain to them at the end of the day, I want you to get the most money. I prefer to be me. I can't be the best market all the time. I strive to be, and I'm going to go to work on it and try to do that. But at the end of the day, I want you to get the most money. But please, I'd coach them. Even if you weren't selling to me, I make sure they understand the risks associated with what they were doing and the moves they were making, and the decisions they were making, because they were impactful not just to them that day and their farm that day, but generationally
Yeah.
on how they got there. This might be a 4, 5, 7, 6, 7 generation farm, and the decisions they make in the next 3 months could be the difference of passing it on to their children and grandchildren, or finding another line of work.
Yeah.
So it can be very tedious and scary for those guys. So
So similarly, are you, so to say, like the financial advisor in the ag world
it really it
would
boils
be like a
down to that. Yeah,
merchandiser?
I mean, you're
Okay.
trying to maximize their profits, and let me tell you, from a farming standpoint, I mean, everything. The mantra of they buy everything retail and sell everything wholesale is really a true statement,
Yeah.
and they feel that, and then socioeconomic, political changes affect the farmer very directly. I mean, if we have an issue, a plane goes down in Russia, the price of fertilizer for that farmer may double, and he has to figure out a way to navigate through that. And same thing from an industry standpoint of the country elevator. I mean, they've got things coming at them left and right that change their dynamics of income. And like right now, we have insurance. You would think, I'm getting a little ahead here, but you would think the biggest hurdle today would be the weather. Drought being hugely detrimental to grain.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Wildfires,
We've seen
yeah.
this year too much rain.
Yes.
I mean, it's such a happy medium, and they always say the farmer's never happy because it's either
Never.
it's
They're
either
never
raining too
happy.
much or raining not enough.
Literally one day you're praying for no rain, and the next day you're praying for rain.
Yeah,
And you just can't. Yeah.
and so that's where we're at today, and there's hurdles on all sides, but some of them are seeming more and more complex, and the insurance picture is ever more so complex from a grain elevator standpoint. Going into this year, a lot of the premiums doubled on some of these guys. So it'll take trying to run your household business and your
Yeah.
mortgage double, and you find that out a month before you owe the next payment. I mean, it's and you've got to make that transition. So that's some
But
of
the
the
product you're offering has not.
yeah,
Still
yeah.
going
I
for the
mean,
current price. Yeah.
you have very traditional set margins, if you were,
Yep.
on how you operate and how you budget and forecast your business. And you get a piece that's as important to them as it is your mortgage, doubling. I mean, it's crippling to some of these folks, and they owe that up front. Now there are at Texas Grain and Feed, we have a multitude of different insurance providers that are associate members that work with our regular members and run the cooperatives and the country elevators to mitigate some of these changes. Whether it be on an a la carte basis, maybe your trucks don't need to be on the same insurance policy with your grain elevator or something, but they're having to get real creative to solve these issues, these net umbrellas, especially, and some insurance companies are bowing out. They don't want to participate.
I was just about to ask that. I know, like in property and casualty, a lot of big companies are exiting Texas because of the weather Texas is getting, which doesn't quite, insurance isn't fair. I came from having my own health insurance agency, but it doesn't really make sense to me. You can't control the weather, so let's reprimand the people who need it and not give them what they need because of the weather. Like we can control Mother Nature. And so I would assume, just like with health or property and casualty, when it comes to crop insurance or insuring commercially, anything like that, are you seeing just a lot of insurance companies that are just saying, I'm sorry?
Yeah. And you're having that right now. So I manage that farmers cooperative in South Texas, and the insurance company that they were with while I was at the helm there is one that just said, we're not writing these policies anymore. And so you look up the next day, you're going to have to pay double. And and it's not something that you can, sort of amortize a little, traditionally. You owe that today. That's your premium. And it's cumbersome. It's going to hurt the industry. I was in Washington a couple months ago, and that was one of the things I was trying to impress upon our lawmakers and legislators was that we're working so hard and trying to get the farm bill created, trying to get as much farm in the farm bill, I think is the sentiment that we can. But my caution to those guys was, and it's a twofold sword. We need help. If you got all your farmers and you got all your subsidies, and those are great, those are protection for that layer of our economy. But let's say they make a crop and we let the current situation progress, they're going to have anywhere to go. Like we said, where do you market it?
Exactly.
If these country elevators can't afford to make ends meet, they're going to be looking funny when you have this grain with nowhere to go. You've got a gap in the supply chain, and anytime that happens, it's like I said earlier, it's a ripple that runs through the entire process.
Exactly.
But it is a double-edged sword. The standpoint of like Texas Grain and Feed, we're not big on government handcuffs or involvement, on all things we do. But on sometimes it's like, well, but we need a little help too.
Yeah.
For these guys, and I think we're getting there. And on some fronts, so the Texas Grain and Feed has a really neat program. It's called AgriComp. One of our counterparts and a company that we work with came to the association a long time ago and solving these insurance problems. And if you're a member of Texas Grain and Feed, you get to get into a safety group for your workers' comp called AgriComp, and it's under Texas Mutual, and you receive benefits through that. A 12% rate reduction in your premium is a huge deal. Some of these guys are paying 40, 50, 60,000 plus. So, just right there, you're saving $7 or $8 grand in your premiums, and then you get dividends depending on the safety in the group, right? Which that's paramount in our industry is safety first. You hear it so many times. We've done 3 different meetings this year on how important safety is, and for our employees, and the betterment of what we're doing. So,
in fact, speaking of safety, is this Harvest Safety Week, National Harvest Safety Week? It is
Harvest Safety Week. It comes National Grain and Feed is doing a big rollout this week, and it's great. There, lots of safety videos and things are at your disposal. I always think it's funny because Texas has been harvest since May 1st, or probably even before that. The Valley starts harvesting milo in April.
It's interesting how the climates throughout the United States they're all different. They say, like here in Texas or even Eastern Mexico, knee high by the 4th of July for corn. Whereas in some other states, it's a lot higher already. It's taller, or they're already.
We've got growers on the upper coast that are picking corn, July 4th, and maybe milo doesn't start.
And ours are just like, okay, as long as they're to your knees, you're good. This should be a good.
Well, like I say, harvest moves from south north, and it starts in the Rio Grande Valley, pretty early, probably not April, but with milo, they plant corn, they plant cotton the earliest, so they usually have the first bale. It's a big deal. and it works its way north. And as far as our conditions this year, we've had a very interesting year. Lots of hurdles, and lots of good things. For like wheat, I think we tipped the scale at like 71 million bushels of wheat, which is on average for Texas a really big
Wow.
number. I think a year or two ago we were at 30 million bushels. So it's a nice wheat year. That being said, you had all of Central Texas that had a really good wheat crop in the making, and they had torrential rain, 7, 8 inches of rain, seemed like every other day. And it was detrimental to the wheat quality. Thank goodness we had, our members that were on the ground floor, the country elevators, that were working with the growers, working with their insurance companies, because as the grades deteriorated, they had to solve that equation. We had companies that we worked with that are our members, like Viterra out of Saginaw. These guys worked with our country elevators and worked with the growers to make sure there's a market for these guys. I mean, the idea at the end of the day, you grow it, and the magic trick is what I always told my customers was that's my job, that's my magic trick. I turn it to cash. And then the idea was to get that cash to you as quick as possible.
Mhm.
I always say, it always sounds like a Chinese proverb, but my mantra for years has been quick pay makes a good friend. And it makes everybody chuckle around me, but that really was. I mean, I always tell those guys, I can pay you as fast as you can load that truck. And that was the goal. Obviously that doesn't happen in all cases, but these growers are our lifeline. The farmers are our lifeline. And when you have such a small, I don't know if you've seen the Skittle anomaly where you have the bucket full of Skittles and you have like 3 Skittles in this bucket, and that's the farmers that have to feed all these Skittles in the big bucket. And we have to take care of those. I always tell my customers when I was trading grain that, I come from a family of farmers. My heart goes out to the farmer, and I want the best thing for the farmer. That's why I always impressed upon them, get the highest price. Make sure it's a qualified buyer. If it's not me, I know I am, so we can do this. But please protect yourself. And here's some things. I always try to coach them. And you're right. You're a financial advisor and on an agricultural side, and they appreciate it. They really do. I mean, they're all the salt of the earth, and they'll do anything for you. So it really makes you want to return that in kind. So
When I think as a whole, America and really the world, but let's just speak of America here. I think they're very uneducated and naive as to where their food really comes from.
Oh yeah.
So they don't realize the importance of the farmers and of the trading and of the grains. And really, if you look at, because I worked for Texas Grain and Feed in 2019, and that's how I met. I was marketing and public relations manager. And so, or director, if you look at the map, and it's just kind of like the Skittles, and it shows the dots of where corn is, higher in this area, and wheat, it's really tiny compared to the population of the United States. And to think, and we can go down a whole rabbit trail with this, I don't really want to touch a whole lot of base on this, but taking land away and taking everything away for the food for America, I don't understand, where do they think it's all going to come from, And so that kind of, you touched base at the very beginning on the railroad tracks of Canada. And whenever in 2019, I went to DC, I was partnered with National Grain and Feed, as you did, I think, this last year too.
Yeah, right.
The big thing we were pushing with legislative was the USMCA trade agreement.
Yep.
So, and that's the United States, Canada, Mexico trade agreement, kind of touch base on the importance of that and what that means for a lot of our viewers who have no idea.
Well, that replaced NAFTA, I believe. And that was, the powers that be sat down and said, look, who's our biggest trade partners that have the least amount of barriers in between us? Obviously, they've got Mexico and Canada. Canada is a top exporter for ethanol, soybean meal, the 5th largest for corn of our export partners. Mexico coming in at number 1. But I mean, these are, like I told you, like they say, we're all in this together.
Yep.
So it made sense. That was a program that I think still makes sense. But it does put us all in one basket. And then you have something like this, and we're all so intertwined. I mean, again, it's so fragile with what we're doing. And as ethanol backs up, as distillers' grain backs up, soybeans back up, it chokes the pipeline. It's terrible. I made this case when the southern border shut down, talking with the Surface Transportation Chairman, explaining to him what happens when you shut down a border like that, and the implications on both sides. I mean, so like feed yards, a feed yard might have 3 days, 4 days worth of space to store grain to feed their animals. So on a good day, 3 or 4 days later, they have nothing. So when you're getting corn from the U.S. and it's going over and it's feeding all these things, we had starving cattle in Mexico that had no recourse. It was terrible, and predicated off immigration issues. And I got to hear more about that and why those shut down. And I think at the end of the day, um, the sentiment was they understood. They really felt like they understood that this can't happen. And we need to go, to the ends of the earth to make sure that this economic corridor, especially as it relates, I mean, if the cars don't come or if the parts don't come, that's an inconvenience. When you start shutting down agriculture or commerce, think people and animals
America
get
runs
hungry.
on it. Exactly.
Yeah, that's it's hard to come back from, and it creates an issue that takes weeks, months to get back on top of. The BNSF is a member of Texas Grain and Feed, and sitting down with them, listening to how, when you shut the border like that, the pipeline chokes. I mean, it takes 2 or 3 weeks to get that back going and to catch up. It's nearly impossible. I don't know how they do it. We've toured their facility and seen the massive network that they have there and control and eyes on everything. It's truly remarkable what they have and how they do their job. But it's incredible to know that it's all this and all these pieces, and you just take one puzzle piece out and the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit frightening when you think about that and how fragile our supply chain is. I mean, like we talked about with somebody the other day, if you flip the light switch and the power doesn't come on, that's an inconvenience. We can get through that, but you can't go very long without food or water. And there's a lot of neat things happening in agriculture right now. I just got through with a legislative summit in San Angelo, Texas, where I learned a magnitude of things about, it was actually coined to me. It's not really all that about agriculture at that summit, but I wanted to go, in my new position, I need to make those connections.
Absolutely.
And I learned more about nuclear power. They're coming into Texas with the ideas of using nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, to put they're apparently ridiculously safe. They said it's a hard case to make when you look at the the older generation with the experience of Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and all that, and you're talking about we're going to put a nuclear reactor in your backyard.
He said, "Heck no."
Yeah, it's a little bit of a hard sell, but the way they explain it, they really make a good case for it being super safe. And when you look at our water needs, I mean, we're running out of water all over the state of Texas. I've talked to several growers. Their wells, they can't lower them anymore. They're just not pumping anymore. Yep. They can't grow the crops that they typically would grow because of the water shortages. So we've got to solve this. And a couple of the pieces are that in West Texas, there's a massive amount of groundwater. It's salty, I guess, is the idea from a layman's term. And there's a desalinification process that they can put through this. And it's not all that uneconomical. It's actually economical and feasible. They just have to get to it. But it comes to a power shortage. So you've got the water scientists and the desalinification guys that are partnering with really oil and gas. I mean, that's where, we're kind of talking about going in with solar power and nuclear power. Where does that leave oil and gas? Well, oil and gas, turns out, is one of the prime advocates for this avenue of power, because they can take, that solves their water problems as far as the leftover water from their oil and gas production. The railroad commissioner spoke at that, when it came time. He lives in Corpus, and he said, we're running out of water down here too. And he said, for part of my job is I oversee these things. And he said, I've got a ton of water out here in West Texas. In fact, through oil production, we're trying to figure out where to go with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, he said, we're trying to solve those problems. If we're trying to inject it back into the ground, but if you go too deep,
I've
you
heard
get
that
seismic ramifications. If you go too shallow, you got to mind your P's and Q's as far as aquifers. He said it's a challenge. He said, so when I heard that we're running out of water and that they had these pieces that could come together, he's like, I've got all the water we need. We've just got to create clean water with it. And so there's a gamut of folks right now that are working very hard for licensing and regulations to put these in and start making clean water for us. And so I'm like, wow,
it's amazing.
We're not talking direct agriculture, but we're directly talking about the needs of the people and agriculture.
Well, and it affects agriculture. And that's the thing. You bring in solar, oil and gas, agriculture, you name it, and everyone comes together, environmentalists, because we're all really in the boat together. Like, we're in this together.
And there's a fundamental idea that we all need to understand, that technology has only gone so far. I mean, everybody's in for sustainability. Everybody's in for, looking at tomorrow for our children and what we'll have for them left when we get done with what we do today. And, the idea is great. Right now we have hurdles in this. California would like to see electric locomotives by a certain, a very near date. That won't work.
No,
it's a great concept.
you can't bring electric to all your agriculture things.
You can't, and we'll get there. I think, we're going to need to get there. But when the technology doesn't exist and you have a government or a local state government or anywhere in between that wants to make new regulations that sound good, and they are good for the greater good, but if the technology can't support it, it is detrimental to the supply chain.
Or the grid. Can
For
the
the
grid
grid.
even support it?
Yes.
I mean,
So-
Texas can't even go through several days of heat.
No.
Or, if we get winter and we get ice.
That's what
Our
blew
grid
my mind. In
collapses.
I think 2020, maybe 21, I was down in
2021, I
South
think.
Texas. And
Talking about
it's
like Snowmageddon.
Snowmageddon.
Yeah.
I'm running a farmers cooperative down there. I saw it coming, and we typically run our fuel tanks, nearly like 20% full, 30% full, just to save on interest. If you stay full all the time, you're constantly paying for that fuel in that tank, regardless of what you're selling. Well, when that started coming, I filled up everything. I brought 3 tankers in on like Thursday or Friday, and the thing hit Saturday. And for about 3 days, I was the only gas station that had fuel for a 100-mile radius. I had cities calling me trying to secure their ambulances, fire trucks, and cruisers with our fuel, and to buy the whole thing. And
Wow, you were ahead of all of them.
and I said we're not doing. I said that
Yeah.
we can't. We first come first serve.
Yeah.
And so we had fire trucks and ambulances fueling, but we got through it. And we had at the time we had an above ground pool. We were having to ice pick into that to have water for the house.
This
It was crazy.
Smart. They get outside the box.
Yeah. And so you hear so much about the grid, and all the improvements, and the hundreds of millions, billions of dollars that Texas is working on. And then fast forward to just recently, this past 6 months, 8 months, we had a 3-day cold snap, and we had members all over the Metroplex, Juby Feeds, West Feeds, up in Munster Milling. I mean,
Monster Milling.
and so this is a time frame where, I don't know if you know much about feeding animals. You're obviously around a lot, but when it's cold, they eat twice as much.
Mhm.
So you've got a
Well,
period
that's their oh my gosh.
metabolism.
Yes, and their heat.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah.
I mean, that's how they generate. That's how they stay alive. They eat more. Well, in this time period, all my, our members in these northern territories, I think Waco North, maybe a few south of Waco, we're getting notified we're going on natural gas curtailment. I've never heard of that coming into this job, and I had members calling me. So we're on the phone with Commissioner of Agriculture, trying to reach the governor. 3 years ago, these businesses were essential. We all carried around pieces of papers that said we're essential and we can leave our home during COVID. And 3 years later, we're being shut down for a 3-day cold snap. We can't afford to keep our animals fed.
Yeah.
And that's where the infrastructure's gotten to. It was disheartening at best, and we did our best to make the right phone calls, elevate the needs of our members to, and I think in the long run, we got the gas turned back on quicker than it would have been without us doing anything.
Mhm.
But it should have never been turned off. I think essential means essential, whether it's now or later. And agriculture is essential, especially in Texas. Texas is a powerhouse of agriculture.
It is.
So I think,
Well, in all actuality, who can really determine essential?
when you're hungry, you figure out essential really
Yeah,
fast.
exactly.
That's a certainty.
And that's one thing going back to where I think the lack of education with agriculture as a whole, we need to do a better job of somehow educating agriculture as itself, because a lot of people don't understand it. So
Oh, I agree. So we have an emerging leaders program where
Yes.
we take around 10 elite individuals. I always coin it young individuals. I don't know why it tends to be, but we've had guys that participate in the program that are in their 50s and 60s.
Yep.
We have a guy that did it 3 years ago that retired this year, that worked for Atterbury. But part of that program was I wanted to take them in, like, our Amarillo regional dinner. I wanted to go see. We had a regional dinner at a steakhouse. The goal was to go. The guy that ran the steakhouse, owned the steakhouse, had 3 feed yards or 2 feed yards. Was to go see the cattle and follow, feeding and how they process them, and follow that through, and then eat dinner that night. And I
Yeah,
told that to
farm to
several
table.
people that aren't used to agriculture. They're like, "There's no way I could look a cow in the face and then eat cow 3 hours later." I'm
well,
like,
that's the reality.
where do you think it comes from?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come from the
Exactly.
grocery
Yeah.
store. So, seeing the supply chain work at its finest is what my goal is for, not just our emerging leaders program, but for people to understand. I mean, there's when you're talking about a dairy that's on site with a milk production, and it's all under one roof. That's cool to me to see,
Yeah, it's
to
really
walk
cool.
through. We're feeding it, we're milking it, we're processing it, we're shipping out the cheese and the milk. People need to understand that, and we do a lot of programs. I mean, agriculture's big, and you got FFA and things that
4-H.
4-H that do put agriculture on the forefront of everybody's minds. But I still think there's a lot of stuff people don't know. And
Yes,
when
I
you've got the big cities, and the people that only see buildings and concrete, making the decisions in the legislature, especially. I mean, those are the people that those mass conglomerates, and the pieces there are what controls who's making the decisions in Austin and Washington. And it's troubling when they don't understand agriculture.
And that's where Texas Grain and Feed and yourself steps in. Is you are literally coming in, you're talking to your farmers and your ranchers here in Texas, and y'all even have some members like in Kansas and some other states as well, right? That y'all kind of work with. But your main job is you take the farmer's concern and you take it to Austin, and you take it to DC, and you present it to legislative and the decision makers of what's going down here on the ground. Correct?
Yeah, you've got to listen to and that's a cool piece that I learned, frankly, at Schooler. To sit down with customers, members, and listen to what their business is. I mean, that was one of the neat things when I would talk to Don Gilbert, works at in Sugarland. He always told me that he enjoyed a man from Schooler 30 years ago that he felt like came down, listened to his business, listened to his needs, and addressed those. And that's all we're trying to do, is listen to our members and address those needs. Right now, I met with a gentleman that runs Barron's Feed, Clark Barron, down in Fredericksburg, Texas. And I wasn't in this position. This was a couple of years ago. I was a director of the association at the time. And he was telling me that in creating feed, all the things they bring in, all the individual ingredients that they use to make these rations are taxed. A tonnage tax they pay on every piece that brings in. They pay this tax. Well, then when they make their finished feed and they make this pellet or this ration, they're taxed again when it goes out the door.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I'm thinking, for a country built on limited taxation, we're getting taxed every time we turn around. And take this guy, he's taxed coming in, taxed going out, and then his customer is taxed. If he's got sales tax, he's taxed like 3 or 4 times before it finds its way into whatever animal he's trying to feed. It's ridiculous. And so the idea is we take that, elevate that voice to the legislator and say, why are we, insensibly, we're not just going to stomp our feet, screaming not fair. Let's talk about why those are there, where those fees go, those taxes go, and what can we do to mitigate this? We're all in this together, the legislators, the cities, the rural areas. What can we do to work together to make sure we all get to the end of this and leave some left for our families and continue generations? So that's the goal, right? But it's an uphill battle for sure.
Yep.
And things like immigration, who'd have thought that in agriculture you would be thinking about immigration? But
and dealing with it.
Yeah.
Yes.
In Washington, I was showing some of the senators and congressmen photographs. So I had a farmer down in Canepa, Texas, that we would send a wheat truck out to his farm for wheat harvest. He would typically cut 5 or 6 loads of grain that day. Never saw the truck back, and he was one of the coffee drinkers. So when I caught him the next morning, I'm like, "Where's our truck? What are you doing out there? Did you break down? Did you not call me?" And he said, "We can't go more than 20 or 30 feet before we have to stop the combine to pick up shoes and backpacks from where Border Patrol has stopped illegal immigrants." And it's just not feasible for them to, by the time they put them down, take their shoes, zip tie them, and march them out of the field, they can't carry all these things. Oftentimes the Border Patrol's on foot or on a four-wheeler, and so it just creates these problems. And he had this combine with all these, I bet there were 20 backpacks and 35 pairs of shoes hanging off all this combine. And I'm like, that's a visual.
Well, and it's scary, and it's a safety concern too, because I know sometimes, like my own family, we're out and a deer comes in front.
Oh, yeah.
And it's chopped. Like, you can't stop it.
News. Yeah.
It's bad. And when you're cutting corn or whatever it is, it's all, you can't see everything that's right in front of you.
No, it
really is
it's agriculture. Everything we do is dangerous, and that's why it's a constant conversation about safety and Safety Week.
Yep, absolutely.
Is to keep your people safe, and that is the goal. You can replace a lot of machinery, you can grow your crop again next year, but life and limbs are very hard to replace. Exactly. So that is always a focus on everything I do, and everything that the association does. Obviously, we're listening to what can help our businesses and grow in Texas, but whatever we do, we're not sacrificing safety on any of the efficiencies that we're running. And a lot of times with new technologies, AI, automation, we're really streamlining the idea of safety around grain handling. It's not the old days of open augers and things like that, where I mean, if you're not paying attention for a split second,
Just like that.
yeah, bad things are going to happen. So anymore, through automation and protection and things of that nature, and working with our safety groups in Texas Grain and Feed, putting those messages down to the individuals that are our members, it helps greatly, and that speaks to that AgriComp safety group in Texas Mutual.
Yeah, they're
We,
amazing.
I just got notified where Texas Mutual is going to be sending out dividends of nearly $600,000 to Texas Grain and Feed members that participate in the safety group.
That's phenomenal.
And that just means everybody's trying to be safe.
Yeah.
And they're rewarded from that. So, I mean,
Which means the world.
It does.
With
And
what's
every
going on right
penny
now.
counts.
Exactly.
In agriculture, every quarter cent counts.
Yep.
And so it's really impactful to everybody's businesses. And when you're driven from a safety perspective, it's a nice achievement to have that
Yes.
feedback.
And everything runs smoother.
Yeah, that return
100%.
on your, and that's back to insurance. I mean, that's I think I saw an old comedian one day that was like, I don't like insurance because I feel like if I get insurance, it's one thing if I have a wreck, but if I get insurance and nothing happens, I feel like
I should get it back.
I should
Yeah,
get some of that back.
I agree.
And that's a lot like how this program works, and
Yeah.
it's a testament to how the Texas Grain and Feed is answering some of these problems. Not that we're doing that today. This has been a policy and a program that's been going for years. So, I commend the guys with the foresight
That's
to say we need to do something to help these insurance issues and our people survive, and our
And
companies survive.
Yeah. And if we don't start today, where would we be next year?
Yeah,
We're
right.
not going to be a step ahead. We're going to be a step behind.
Hmm.
So it all takes time.
That goes back to that surprise doubling in your mortgage payment.
Yep, exactly.
That's what you try to get in front of
Yep.
and prevent. So
Exactly.
and
Always trying to
absolutely.
foresee the future, Thad, for
Yeah.
sure.
And we've got guys who are doing that. And talking to members. We just went through a member renewal, and it seemed like every one of them was, it's a little bit of the what have you done for me lately, and you kind of go through the steps. And when you say you're doing these things to help them on their insurance, I mean it's a genuine appreciation that you're getting from these guys. But
Well, and that's the thing, too. If you're a member, you should be taking advantage of the things that are offered to you. And if you're not, well, then you should be.
well, yeah. I
Because
mean,
there's a lot of things that are out there.
and there's a 30,000 foot, view of what the
Yes.
association does. One of the key things that we ended up, it was happenstance. We just came to it. I was traveling from a Jeeps convention in Kansas City, which is an amazing, amazing association. It's a Jeeps.
Not Jeeps
group.
you drive.
No, not
That's
Jeeps You
very
Drive. It's a grain elevator and processing society. They're a little different than us. Their members are the individual employees, and
Nice.
they have the companies that are members too, and they do all the grain efficiencies and handling. It's an amazing deal. But we were on the way back from that, back to Texas, and my wife was riding with me. She's kind of my co-pilot everywhere I go.
Family's amazing.
Oh, for the past 17 years, she's great. Love my wife. Thank you very much for all she does. But she got a call from one of her friends that lives in Pampa and said, what's going on in San Angelo? Do you have room? This and this. We just had a fire breakout. And so, of course, I'm tuning in and listening, and we were on the ground floor of this. And I made the call to our chairman because the Texas Grain and Feed to date doesn't have a charitable foundation. We're a
I'm
nonprofit.
so happy you rolled into this. That's what I was
That's
just
crazy.
about to roll into.
And I'd seen this. Of course, I've been a member of Texas Grain and Feed for nearly 3 decades. But you've seen these times of hurricanes and things. And I always tell people when I was at Schooler, I got a call from the CEO at the time when Harvey hit. And he said, you're in that marketplace. You're on the ground there. You got to know better than we do. We're making a big donation to United Way. But in the big scope of things, we don't think that they're waiting on our donation to go buy that next generator.
Mm-hmm.
You could possibly. So I think they gave me $100,000 from the foundation of Schooler to go down and do something. And we gave that to, I think, a Catholic church in Wharton, Texas. It was housing several of our members, like actual people. We gave it to a fire department, a volunteer fire department on the other side of Houston. These people, here's a $30,000 or $40,000 check, and it changed their world.
Mm-hmm.
We donated to the Cajun Navy, and I told somebody I've had a lot of great days trading grain over the years, but I said I felt the best when I was doing that work. Is there a job I could do where I just give away money? And the answer was no at the time, but
At the
not
time.
a
Yeah.
lot of longevity in that. But no, this deal happened in the Panhandle, and I'm thinking there's got to be something the
Yes.
association can do where we don't have a charitable thing. So in reaching out to our chairman and then reaching out to our CPA, they gave me the green light. So we created basically just a sponsorship. So you can if you need the tax write-off for these sort of things, you can use that from advertising.
For the wildfire relief.
For the
Correct,
wildfire
yeah.
relief.
We went through a lot of that.
And so, if you're a business, you can write that off for advertising is all you got. But so I put out the word to our membership that we're going to try to raise what we can to send relief funds to the Panhandle to help our member communities up there. And I think that's an important part of what we should be doing. Well, heck, we raised over $70,000 from member companies and member employees. We had member companies that were raising, giving their employees an opportunity to donate through their company. And it happened so quickly. I mean, we had $20,000, $30,000 in a week or two. So I had to figure out a way, since this was we're jumping in the deep end, and I didn't think this completely through. So we got to send this money up there.
I love what you did though.
It was great. I lucked out. I think it might have been my wife's idea. I don't know. But you had avenues to donate directly to the Panhandle, and I worked with the county extension agent up there that was working on those things. But I saw right away that we had other members that were, you had some members that had the ability to give money, and then they wanted to help, and then you had some members that had the ability, boots on the ground, to
provide hay,
and actually get those shipments going. And so we partnered with our members that were doing that and sent those funds directly to them to help pay for hay, fencing materials, feed tubs, feed in general, rations, bags. We sent dozens of truckloads and participated in those going up there. And it was great. Those members were doing an amazing job. They were facilitating those truckloads. They appreciated our involvement with them, working with them side by side. So you had members contributing to members that were helping member communities. I mean,
genius.
In merchandising, you have work called arbitrage. And this was my idea of arbitrage with these relief dollars. And it was really great. I mean, to help those folks up there.
Love that. Well, to wrap this up, I think we've had great talk, and a lot of our viewers, I think, will get a better understanding of how grain and feed works, and Texas Grain and Feed Association, and the people who have their boots on the ground to fight for this country for really our greatest commodity.
Yeah, our farmers, our ranchers, our supply chain, our feed mills, our feed manufacturers, our cooperatives, we produce all kinds of things. I have a meeting later today with HEB, and we're going to talk to them about.
That's phenomenal.
It's really neat. We're growing the association. We're making it great again. If you're out there, if you're listening and you want to participate in Texas agriculture, Texas Grain Feed is a great avenue. We have whether you're a feed mill, flour mill, rice mill, an exporter, we have a spot for you. Or if you're
well, heck, I remember taking emerging leaders to Texas whiskey.
Yeah.
And seeing how the process of how whiskey was even made and how it comes from the corn. So it comes from our farmers right here.
You have your grain going in, you have your byproduct coming out that's feeding something.
Yep.
I mean, it really is a full process. And depending on where you're at and what you're doing, there's a multitude of layers, whether it be the dairy and the silage, or the leftover byproducts from ethanol production in the dry distillers goods. Dry distillers grain. But it's crazy when you lay it out, all the different avenues of agriculture, all things, and anymore, the byproducts have all found a place into the marketplace.
Yeah.
To make businesses and make different projects run more efficiently. So it's really neat. But that was one thing I was going to tell HEB. I was like, we're not just your deer. My members don't just bag deer corn. They're bagging your rice. They're bagging, that's the flour that's on your shelves. The bread. I mean, it's amazing how intertwined all these pieces are. So when you think about who's going to be a member of Texas Grain Feed, what do we do? It's amazing to me that I'm like, you're going to have a hard time figuring out a way that you don't fit into to our network.
Exactly.
And our people that are helping make the wheels go round. So
if people wanted to get in touch.
Oh yeah. Reach out.
How would they do that?
Accessibility is my key. So you can reach me 24/7. Nearly all our information is on our website.
TGFA.com.
TGFA@TGFA.com is our email. TGFA.com, Texas Grain and Feed Association. Please check us out. Our members are on there. Our leadership is on there, and we're eager to help. And the goal is just the betterment of Texas agriculture.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you have any questions, you can ask questions in the comments below. But I love what you're doing with the association and how you're making the association great again.
That's right. We haven't made the hats yet.
Texas great again, and America great again, and really just push the education and push the movement on our largest commodity, which is feeding ourselves. And all the products that you eat and you consume literally comes from people just like you and I who are on the ground growing it and trying to help sustain it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for the input. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. Tune in for our next show.